Warriors episode 454. Woo! As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by resident, that's the old intro, Viable Human, Chris Saturn. I don't know where I am.
I don't remember what you did last episode.
I think I did the old one last episode.
Maybe.
I think I've just reverted to the old intro.
They're all fine.
Oh, no. Viable Human, Chris Saturn. Yeah, I think I called you an old bastard last episode.
That's all right. I am an old bastard. We talked about it in the pre-show last episode.
Yeah, but I am now also one. So
Well, yeah.
I don't. Yeah, I think I just went right back to the old. I don't know why this new intro has never stuck. It's almost like I did the old one 400 times.
Yeah, something like that. It's weird. More than that, because you sometimes called me that on the old show too.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. So here we are, so many years later. My week.
Yes, sir.
I'm still playing Last Epoch.
That's the Diablo-like, right?
It is the Diablo-like. The action RPG is the genre designation, which I feel is just such a bland genre designation and could apply to so many other games like Ys and Zelda that why is... But that aside, it is the Diablo-like, and they seem to have worked out most of their launch woes. I'm not really running into any issues playing it online. Everything's running pretty smoothly. I'm playing a necromancer, so I've got a million billion summons all the time too, and it's not slowing anything down. Runs great.
I've also heard that genre referred to as real-time CRPG.
I don't... Don't we already have those? What about Neverwinter Nights?
Yeah, see, those are real-time turn-based CRPG.
What the fuck does that mean?
I don't fucking know.
None of... I think... Because here's the thing. I have an English degree. Mm-hmm. So I'm explicitly trained in the fact that words basically mean nothing, right?
Yeah.
But I've never felt it so strongly as I have in the world of video game genre designations, where anything means everything and words are meaningless.
Yeah.
Welcome to video game genre designations. Yeah. Oh, this is a horror game. What does it play like? Nobody knows, but it's scary. What?
What perspective is it?
It's horror. Are there cards? If they are, they're scary. It's fun. It's been running pretty good. I did bounce back to Diablo 4 just to kind of, with Last Epoch fresh in my mind to kind of compare and contrast.
Yeah.
And was immediately having technical issues and lag and all kinds of problems with D4, which is really embarrassing because, it's run by a relatively large corporation, Microsoft.
I've heard of them.
So it just seems kind of weird.
Oh, that's the Flight Simulator guys.
Yeah, they're the guys that make Flight Simulator, and they did Fable. So
and Microsoft Bob.
Microsoft Bob. So that was a little bit of Schadenfreude of getting to play this little indie game, and it runs great after the launch woes have all been kind of worked out. They've been very open about their updates and things, and then I log into D4, and it just kind of runs like trash. I guess really I'm the fool because I paid for both games at the end of the day.
I think D4 is coming to Game Pass here in a couple of weeks too.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good. Hopefully it runs better on Xbox because I was having issues. It's my internet's good enough that I don't just inherently get lag in online games. Mm-hmm. I've played a lot of MMOs recently and have not really experienced any of that. And then it's just kind of telling to log into D4 and immediately have lag spikes. And weird performance issues. I'm like, how the fuck? How did you mess it up this bad? You know what I mean? Last Epoch was a train wreck at launch, but it's an indie team. It's a huge launch for them. I think it's their first game. It's frustrating, but I kind of get it. D4, it's the fourth one. You've done it 3 other times.
So weird. And
what is going on?
Also, what's weird is it's coming to Game Pass, but not PC Game Pass.
That's weird.
Because the PC version is not available through the Xbox app. It is only on Steam and Battle.net.
Microsoft just needs to give it the fuck up and include Game Pass access on Steam the way that EA Play and Ubisoft Connect do.
Also, for that matter, they need to get rid of Battle.net.
Yeah.
It's
just
time
go away.
It's come and gone.
Yeah. Also, I made fun of this in the chat. Someone brought it up. I think it was Saracen in the Discord brought it up and said, "Hey, they added DS emulation to the Miu Mini Plus."
Yeah.
And I think my response was like, "Why the fuck would anyone want to play DS games on a single screen, tiny handheld,
Right.
with no touch screen and no analog stick? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard."
Yeah.
So I did it because I'm a dumb man
you did.
that
Yeah.
does dumb things.
True.
And I am, and even in that moment, he was like, "Oh, it works pretty good, though." He's right. It does. And I was relatively surprised because here's what I found is another popular handheld, the Retroid Pocket, also supports DS emulation. And on the Retroid Pocket wiki is an entire wiki article that is nothing but DS games that either very sparsely or do not use the bottom screen input at all.
That's good.
And so it was just a curated list of games that I could emulate on my Miu Mini.
Yeah.
And so I was playing, like, Tetris DS is a great example.
Yeah.
Because basically
Unless you're playing that one push mode.
Yeah, unless you're playing the push mode, which is pretty
which is
fun.
My favorite.
But even then, push mode can be controlled with the buttons, and you can make the two screens stacked on the Miu.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of a narrow playing field, but it works. I was playing Contra 4 that way. I was playing Retro Game Challenge. I was playing Tetris DS. It works really well. I'm very shocked.
I bet Donisaro would work now that there's that fan patch that gets rid of all the touchscreen controls.
Yeah, and then the other DS Castlevania games, Order of Ecclesia and Portrait of Ruin, also work pretty well.
Yeah, there's no map.
Well, you can also layer it so that the bottom screen is shown, but it's a transparent layer in the corner.
I hate that. I would hate that so much.
Really? Why?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't know why. That just sounds awful to me.
That's weird. I mean, obviously, you can also just turn it off, and then R2 flips between your screens, so R2 would basically just be your map button at that point, I guess, which wouldn't be that different from a lot of other Castlevania games.
Right. You would just not be paused while you're looking at it.
Yeah, you'd want to, make a point to pause or think about it. You can also do it so that it shows both screens and they're not overlapped, but obviously it cuts into your playfield a little bit.
Right, yeah.
So that you can see your map screen teeny tiny in the corner. But it works surprisingly well. And having actually experienced it, there is a surprising amount of DS games that are still a little weird to play, but you can. And it works. Yeah. And it was nice to see.
Nice.
Very, very nice to see. And I'm continue to be so impressed with Onion OS on the Miu Mini. It's
nice.
So impressive. Because here's the thing. Anything that uses like RetroArch cores, it's going to work pretty good, basically, whatever device you have it on, because RetroArch is built to work with RetroArch, so it all just kind of works, and it all feeds into different various front ends very cleanly.
Right.
But a thing I run into, like on Steam Deck, is a lot of the emulators that EmuDeck installs run standalone versions. And so there's separate standalone versions, so when you boot into the game from like Emulation Station, it boots up a whole separate third-party application, and it can get a little jank and a little weird.
Yeah, I've dealt with a little bit of that so far.
Yeah, it's not terrible, but it's just not super optimized, and there's not really a way to super optimize it.
Unless those cores were added into RetroArch.
Right, they're just standalone programs. Like, what are you supposed to do?
Right.
But the DS emulator that the Miu Mini Plus uses is standalone. And because it's built specifically for only this hardware, they can perfectly integrate it.
Nice. So
that it works cleanly with the front end. And when you hit the buttons that normally open the RetroArch menu, they open the menus for this standalone emulator that has its own Miu Mini Plus specific menu system built into it.
Nice.
It's just really clean. I was very surprised at how clean it was, how well it worked. Obviously, it doesn't have all of the options and features of RetroArch because RetroArch is, pretty mature at this point. But it was just really cool. It worked really well. Nice. And there's always that, like, at least on like any PC platform, Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever, where you go to start using a new emulator for a different system and you're like, all right, I have to go through all the rigmarole.
Right.
The setting it up, the mapping my hotkeys, figuring out how the graphics options work, figuring out all the shit. It's just nice to get to install a new core and it all just automatically works exactly the way I would expect it to, in line with how all the other ones work, homogenized within Onion OS. It is so professional feeling.
That's nice.
So it was just it was a very nice experience. I had a good time with it and forgot how awesome Retro Game Challenge is. What a cool...
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Or is it Retro Game Master?
Retro Game Challenge is what the DS game was called.
That's the name of the DS game, and then the American version of the show was called Retro
Yes.
Game Master. Okay,
Correct.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Still super fun, super cute game.
Oh, yeah. I
Really
still need
enjoyed
to finish the second one. I never did finish that.
Oh yeah, the fan translation of it. Yeah, I downloaded it, never really went anywhere with it because life happened.
Right,
Saturn.
exactly.
Life found a way. What have
To
you been
interrupt your
playing?
gaming.
What have you been playing?
So I forgot to put it in the notes, but I picked up a backbone.
Oh yeah. This was so weird seeing you talking about a handheld
Every
in the
now and
chat
then, right?
that you were using as a handheld.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
Well,
Saturn
it's
with a
for when I'm at
handheld.
work.
Yeah.
So it's basically just a phone grip essentially, but it's officially licensed by PlayStation, so it has full compatibility with PS Remote Play. Because otherwise, PS Remote Play complains about a lot of the handheld grips because they're not PlayStation controllers.
Oh
Justin.
no, they're not certified.
You're supposed to use a DualSense.
Jesus. God forbid they just use fucking X input.
Right.
Get it over with.
So it does have PlayStation face buttons on the gamepad, but it works with whatever. It works with native Android games, it works with my emulators, and it works with all the streaming devices, or streaming services rather. And the app that comes with it gives it a nice little front end interface to let you choose all your different
that's cool.
streaming services.
So it kind of skirts around the issue of Android treating controllers kind of weirdly and inconsistently some of the time.
Now, the downside is if you do give it full integration with the app, then you lose the home button within applications because it will go back to that app.
Yeah.
Which is a little frustrating. But if you don't use the home button very often, that's easy enough to work around.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's just you have to consciously be like, I am going into video game mode now, and my phone is no longer a functional phone for a little bit.
Well, it also means you don't have the home button functionality within those apps. Like if you're using Steam Link, you can't open up the Steam menu through the home button.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because it'll go back to that other app instead.
Yeah, that's a little annoying.
It is a little annoying, but it works well enough.
I love how every company wants to act like streaming is the future, but then none of them can seem to figure out what the fuck, how to hand off home button presses to one another.
I hate it so much. But there is it works well. I've been pretty happy with it. I tried streaming all my different consoles to it, except for the Switch, which obviously doesn't like to talk to anything but itself.
Right.
But I was able to stream my Xbox to it, and my PlayStation to it, and my Steam, my desktop through Steam. Also, it supports GeForce Now, which I thought I would test out GeForce Now again, see how that has gone. And there's no queues when you play it at night, which is great.
It's good.
Also, I've noticed that it now allows you to link BattleNet and Xbox as services to stream, which was part of their whole deal with the EU when they were doing the Activision buyout.
Yeah,
was BattleNet and Xbox would come to all streaming services and not just Game Pass streaming.
Which, can I just say that if I were to support a streaming service, it would be GeForce Now. I don't have a lot of love for NVIDIA, but just having not a video game publishing house running the streaming service seems like a smart idea.
It's nice. Now, I did, I will say, GeForce Now, still a little wonky sometimes, but I noticed that if you link the Xbox app to it, it's only Xbox PC. It's not like Xbox console games.
Okay.
But it does give you access to both your purchased Xbox PC games and your Game Pass.
Well, that's nice.
So any PC Game Pass games that are not blocked by third-party publishers, you can then stream through GeForce Now to whatever device you want to play them on, which is something that Microsoft themselves don't support.
Yeah.
So if you want to play the PC version of Age of Empires on another device, you can stream it through GeForce Now, which is neat. Which means that any Game Pass PC games that play poorly on Linux can be streamed through the GeForce Now web interface. So you can then play those Game Pass PC games on Linux through something at least, which, that's nice.
It's something. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so I was playing around with that. It's a nice little handheld. It works well. It does feel premium. The D-pad took me a little getting used to. It kind of feels like the Stadia D-pad, which I like, but it's a little slipperier. Just because the polish on the front, because it has to look all fancy and polished like a PS5 controller. But it's all right. It's a fine interface. It works well. It does feel like a good device.
Yeah, I forgot. Oh no, you go ahead and finish.
Oh no, go ahead.
No, I had a thing I was going back to my week that I totally forgot.
Yeah, go ahead.
I in the realm of controllers, I picked up one of the Xbox Elite Series 2 controllers.
Oh, I hear those break easily.
My wife had to return. She bought a very expensive mouse, didn't like it, returned it to Best Buy, didn't have the receipt, and was outside the return period, so only got store credit and ended up picking up a way cheaper mouse that she liked more. And she's like, well, I've got this extra credit. What do we do? And I was like, well, we have to buy a controller, obviously. Duh-doy.
That's the thing you buy at electronics stores.
And I picked up one of these Elite controllers just to kind of see what all the hubbub was about. You know, like there's supposed to be, I've heard there's a lot of problems, but I've also heard that they're still very nice controllers.
Yeah. It's funny. I always hear people are like, oh, they break so easily. I'm on my 12th now because I won't stop buying them because of how good they are.
I don't know how people are breaking these controllers so badly.
Yeah.
Like, unless they just mean joystick drift, which, you know, yeah, that's definitely a thing. They're not Hall effect. Right. I love, first of all, the whole thing is like rubberized finish, which I love as a sweaty-handed individual. I put all my controllers in silicone grips whenever I can because I'm so sweaty. I love the interchangeable joysticks is very, very nice. All of the buttons and triggers and everything are like metal. And the back paddles are not only removable, which is really, really nice, but also fully programmable, which is cool. Nice. I wish you could program them on the controller without having to use the app in Windows while plugged in via USB-C, which is kind of dumb. Control-wise, very premium feeling controller, very nice. I loved swapping out my left stick for a stick that is, because the Xbox joysticks have kind of a rough outer ring around the edges. And I don't move my sticks with my thumb pressed totally into the middle of the joystick. I move them by the edge. So I end up dragging my thumb around that kind of rough outer edge a lot, and it gets a little irritating in long sessions.
I found you have very sensitive fingers when it comes to
I do have sensitive fingers. And I'm also just I'm not trying to brag, but I have very strong hands, so I just have a strong grip on things.
Hands.
And it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
But because of that, my left thumb is always getting irritated by that kind of rough outer ring. And so I was able to swap it because that's the stick you use for movements, the stick you move the most. And so I swapped it for a much smoother joystick, and it's so much nicer. And I get to keep my extra grippy stick for my aiming stick. Here's the problem with the controller, and it is not an issue with my controller. It is an inherent design flaw in the Elite Series 2 controller. L3 and R3 don't work if you're tilted if the sticks are tilted. Period. If your stick is tilted at any diagonal, so northwest, southwest, southeast, northeast, then pressing the respective L3 or R3 on that stick is very hard. So it requires a lot of pressure. And sometimes just doesn't register and has messed up physical feedback. So the actual click itself may or may not happen. Sometimes the click will happen, but it doesn't press the button. Sometimes you get like a false half click.
And that's the button that everybody's using for run now.
Yeah. Now here's the thing. It's not a deal breaker for me because I fucking hate L3 and R3. Because let me tell you, pressing down on L3 while also keeping the stick tilted is uncomfortable. For like, if I'm holding that for a long time because I'm running somewhere in a game, that's unfucking
Most games have toggle run with that.
Not all of them,
click it in once to run, and then you keep
Not all of them, though. Returnal, for example. You got to hold that shit down.
Oh, that's stupid.
It is stupid, and it's annoying. I've never enjoyed L3, R3, so I have them mapped to two of my back paddles. Yeah, which is fine. But here's the thing. That's fucking broken. It is a broken design. How does Microsoft Incorporated release $120 goddamn controller that two of the buttons literally don't work half the time? Because here's the thing. If you're using it for running, then chances are the stick is tilted.
Look, Justin, this is just a tiny company. They've never made hardware before.
I just can't get over and this is their premium controller. I Googled. I was like, is mine broken? And everyone's like, oh, yeah, that's just what the Elite Series 2 is like. I'm like, what do you mean that's what it's like? It's fucking busted and doesn't work and was designed by idiots? Like, what are you talking about?
Every time I look at these premium Elite high-end controllers, not just Microsoft's, but also Sony's and Turtle Beach's and all this stuff, every time I look at them, I find more criticisms than I find praise of them. And it really convinces me not to spend money on them.
If I hadn't basically got it for store credit that we didn't know what else to do with, I'd be returning it. Granted, again, L3R3 is not a deal breaker for me because I prefer them on the back paddles.
Right.
But a fit and finish of it, the magnetic interchangeable parts, very premium, very nice. The thing's got to weigh a pound. Comes with its own carrying case. It's great. But
very nice.
Also, literally not all of the buttons work all of the time, which is a pretty
who
big
needs that
feature
on a controller?
In a controller. I mean, it's right up there with like is able to be held by human hands, which is something that the N64 fails at. So like, it's just shocking that these first-party controllers.
I while you were talking about that, it reminded me some of the things that I didn't mention about the backbone.
Yes.
So one, it has USB pass-through, so that you can charge your phone while you're using it.
Oh, that's nice.
And it has no battery built into it, so it only uses your phone's battery, but it uses very little battery.
That's good.
And also it has a headphone port on it, so even if your phone doesn't have a headphone port, you can plug in headphones and use them for anything on your phone, which is also nice. And also, if you connect it to a PC through USB-C cable through the pass-through, you can open up the app that comes with it and tell it to use it as a PC controller, and it'll switch itself into PC controller mode. You remove your phone, and then it's just a PC gamepad.
Neat. I don't know that I would use it as a PC gamepad given all my other options, but if you got nothing else, certainly.
If I'm traveling with it, if I have that in my laptop, that's a pretty good option. That's one less controller I got to carry. So it's a neat option, but if I'm at home, that's the last controller I'm going to use.
It's just I was so disappointed in that. And everything else,
Dustin.
Again, everything else on it, great. Carrying case is great. Love the magnetic swaps. They've got a really genius system for the tensioning on the sticks. You can change the tension on them. A feature I didn't think I would give a shit about is you can lock down the triggers so that the press is super shallow, which I didn't think I'd give a shit about. But it turns out for shooting games, having to push the stick 90% or the trigger 90% less to get it to register is really nice. I'm just flabbergasted. I'm blown away that Microsoft Incorporated on their Elite Premium controller on the second revision, 2 of the buttons don't work.
I'm pretty spoiled by the triggers on the PS5 now. Just the resistive where they will push back at you and then you finally feel like you've pushed through it. That's so nice. I want every game to have that.
I keep thinking about picking up one of the new DualSense controllers just because controllers. Like, I don't want a PS5 at all, but like, I'm curious, you know. They still got that shitty D-pad?
It's much better than it used to be. It is still separated in the middle, but just barely. And it tapers in on all the other buttons enough that you almost don't even feel the separation.
Interesting.
But I actually don't hate the PlayStation D-pad.
Yeah, I did. PS3 D-pad was very bad. PS4 D-pad was usable.
Yeah,
for me.
I would say that the PS5 is even more improved than the PS4.
Well, that's good. That's good.
But also, other things that I was playing this week, I went back to Void Stranger, and I finally got past the point where it's just a Sokoban game.
Oh, that's good.
And it gets really weird and deep, and like every time that I thought that I was making a mistake and would find myself in a much deeper level of the game is weird. And also, all of the story in the game is only told through turning the game off.
Interesting.
So like if like you occasionally reach a point in the game where it's like, it's a tree, do you want to rest here?
Right.
And if you say yes, it saves and then force closes the game.
What?
And then the next time you start it up, rather than resuming, you go through a flashback where it tells you story and then you resume. But if you get to a tree and you say you don't want to rest, you don't get that story. It's gone. until if you replay the game and get back to that point. And a lot of the flashbacks include mini games that play like completely different genres. Like one of them is a DDR clone, and one of them is like a Dragon Quest style fight against a grumpy princess who doesn't want to get out of bed. And it's just very strange. It's a very strange game, and I do recommend it. It's very neat.
How weird.
And then I also picked up Forspoken.
Oh, did you?
When this was announced, I remember seeing the trailer and thinking, that is not a full price game. If that drops under $20, I will consider it. Well, it dropped under $20.
How is it?
So I picked it up on Xbox, and it starts out very exposition heavy. And the writing isn't as bad as I was led to believe, but it is... it's very like Marvel movie snarky.
It felt very like, hello, fellow Gen Zers.
Right. My problem isn't like the actual story or the writing. My problem is during the gameplay, it's one of those games where your character constantly wants to talk at themselves.
Oh no.
And she doesn't shut up. And she has that signature current movie snark.
Yeah.
All the time. Like she'll be like, I guess I could reach that ledge if I jump for it. like just shut up.
She's too cool to be in the game.
Right?
Like she just can't stand it.
It's like, I bet I could outrun these guys if I manage to jump over that fence.
Oh,
like,
no.
Just do it then.
Yeah, just you don't
need to narrate it.
Unfortunate.
I haven't gotten far enough in the gameplay to know if the actual gameplay is good. Like once you actually unlock the abilities that make the game what it is. I'm not as offended by it as I feared I would be. But the casual talking has to stop. I can't. It's too much.
Yeah.
That's my problem.
That's the back of the box quote for you. Forspoken.
Yeah.
Not as offensive as I thought it would be. Still offended.
Yeah.
Not as offended as I thought.
Not as offended as I thought I would be, please shut up. That's my back of the box review.
Let's do some news.
Okay.
First up, a bug is removing users' licenses to digital games across PSN. Sony has no fix and suggests people buy new hardware instead because fuck you. You should get a second job to afford a PlayStation 3, you lazy entitled piece of shit. Where's Sony?
Did you read what their response to people was?
No, what was it?
It was like, well, it's a hardware fault on your PS5. You'll need to replace it. Was it covered under warranty? No. And one guy actually went out and bought a second PS5.
Oh, no.
And that didn't fix anything. And he contacted them. They're like, your new one is also faulty. and the thing is, it's not just affecting PS5. It's affecting PS4 and PS Vita and PS3. And it's just taking away people's entire digital libraries. And Sony's response is, well, buy another one.
How does Sony, uniquely among the console manufacturers right now, have these fucking problems?
I don't get it.
Now, all three of them have their own problems.
Sure. Absolutely.
Admittedly, absolutely, yes.
But this is something Sony has a special problem with.
Sony has the weirdest, dumbest problems, and the answer is always like, I don't know, maybe quit being an idiot. And you're like, what the fuck am I supposed to do?
Right?
Every time.
And I don't get how they're still getting away with it. Like this isn't causing such a severe uproar that people aren't buying digital games.
That's insane.
When they shouldn't. I don't trust Sony to buy digital games from them anymore.
It's bizarre. The beta pre-release builds of Cave Story have been found after a 20-year search.
That's really neat.
Yeah, that is neat. And such an important indie game.
Right?
We honestly, I didn't realize that we didn't have that kind of history for this kind of. Usually, for the smaller titles like this, we've got lots of history. It's interesting that this would be lost.
Lot of development information was known, but some of these early builds that were released before the game came out had been lost to time, and people just couldn't find them anymore. But now they have been preserved. God damn it, Saturn. Tobal #1 and Blue Dragon artist Akira Toriyama has tragically passed away on March 1st at age 68. The worst possible way to remember him. I was trying so hard all week to not be snarky about it because So obviously, very well known for Dragon Ball and Dragon Quest, and
Yes.
and Chrono Trigger, and his art is
Absolutely.
beloved. And I am always pretty critical of Toriyama and his art, and I have been trying my best to not be critical all week. But
Yeah.
I am sad that he has passed.
It's terrible. And so young. I mean, 68 is not that old.
And he has he's made such a huge impact on the worlds of manga and anime and video games.
Totally.
And it's hard to say where we would even be as far as any of those fields without him. So it
Like,
is
his
it's sad
influence
that he
just
is-
across Japanese media in general
Right.
is gigantic.
Yeah, and I think one of his last video games that he worked on was Fantasian, which was that Apple Arcade exclusive.
There's that new one coming out. What's it called? Desert World, something like that. Desert.
Oh
something?
yeah, that's right. He was involved.
And
with
I'm
that.
a little nervous because that's a day one buy for me because I like Akira Toriyama's art. I was Dragon Ball was huge for me growing up. I enjoyed Dragon Quest as an adult. I've
And Tobal number 1.
and Tobal number 1 and Blue Dragon. I'll tell you what, I bought Blue Dragon because of the art. That's why I bought the game. Turns out the game sucks, but I bought it because of Toriyama's art. I like Toriyama.
I bought it because of Sakaguchi and was disappointed.
Toriyama is, for me, like, Dragon Ball was my intro to anime.
Yeah.
And so Toriyama, to me, is the ubiquitous anime style that everything roots back to. And for a lot of projects, it's kind of true because he just was so influential.
Yeah, and for me, I was never a big Dragon Ball fan. Chrono Trigger was the first time that I really noticed him, because even though I was a big Dragon Quest fan already at that point, none of his art was on the Western releases. And,
and you don't really see it in the game.
Yeah, in game, the
early
monsters
games anyway.
was, as much as you could see, and it was still digitized pretty harshly.
Yeah.
So Chrono Trigger was my introduction really to Toriyama. So I, he incredibly influential, and it is a tragedy that he has left us so young. But he also has famously been having some health issues the last few years, and has trained his staff at Bird Studio to emulate his style so well that a lot of people don't realize how little he had been working the last several years.
He'd been kind of fading out a little bit,
So,
So
fortunately, he has trained this staff to keep up his art style. So I don't think we're going to see an overnight drop in that style, and his proteges will hopefully be able to continue his art in like that game that's in development. Also, they're already working on new Dragon Ball stuff, I'm sure, and the new Dragon Quest stuff. So.
He is still, to date, my favorite artist for vehicles and dinosaurs.
Yeah,
if you're drawing vehicles or dinosaurs, that's what I want Toriyama drawing it, because they're just so great.
His whole Reptite scenes in Chrono Trigger are really neat. And that
Human beings, he just seems to draw Gohan over and over.
Yeah,
I don't know
the same
what's
three
going on.
faces. It's the one lady face and two dude faces. That's all he does. Including like he'll put it in different shapes, like it'll be a heavier old lady but still the same lady face. But no, like that one boss in Chrono Trigger, that's the big boss Tyrannosaurus. That was just such an epic scene on Super NES. Just really impressive.
I love vehicles and dinosaurs. Love it. Just love his stuff.
I wasn't sure if you were gonna read that before you actually started reading it, and I was worried that you were going to get like halfway through that and be like, really?
It's on the teleprompter. I'm going to read it. Falcom has announced a new Xanadu title to release in Japan later this year, the first new game in the nearly 40-year-old series in about a decade. So good to see more of that coming out. Dr. Mario, Mario Golf, and Mario Tennis all added to the Game Boy library and Nintendo Switch Online. So they were added on March 10th, Mario Day. So they added 2 good Mario games on March 10th. So that's nice to see.
They're all good games, but that's the worst version of Dr. Mario they could have chosen.
It really is. Also, it's Dr. Mario. So
I love Dr. Mario, but man, why the Game Boy version? That's just not the when you think of Dr. Mario, you think, oh, let's play it in black and white.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
A new Super Mario Brothers movie was also announced as being in production for an estimated April 2026 release date. I don't think this surprises anybody. The movie was wildly successful. Why wouldn't they keep doing it?
The phrasing seemed weird. If I remember right, it was something like, this is not a sequel, but an expansion of the Mario universe of a new Mario movie. And that, I don't remember exactly how they phrased it, but it came across as very stilted and awkward.
Yeah. I would love to see just like stereotypical sports movie, but it's like Mario Tennis, but they just do it like a regular tennis documentary or something. You know, like I know it's the dumbest concept ever, but I
want
would
the second
enjoy that.
movie to be Mario's Dream, and it's just all Mario 2.
Oh yeah, and it's just totally psychedelic and weird.
Right?
A build of Time Splitters 4 from 2008 was found on a development PlayStation 3 purchased on eBay. So nice to see that preserved. This was the canceled Time Splitters sequel that we never got.
Yeah, it was not much more than just a pitch that they were selling to publishers, but still something.
Peter Moore says the youth won't buy video game consoles because they have iPhones and PCs, and then he said some other dumb shit because he's an out-of-touch old fucking idiot. He was like, why would I buy a gaming thing when I can get a PC? Peter, people have been saying that since video game consoles existed.
Yes.
They've existed in lockstep with computers, and the argument over why would you buy a console when you buy a PC has always been there. Also, fucking Resident Evil 2 Remake got ported to iPhone. It's not like they're over here playing fucking Candy Crush. They can get real games on
Resident Evil 4.
Was it 4 Remake?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Like, it's just the dumbest way to be mad about this.
It was either Resident Evil 4 or Resident Evil 8. Actually, it might have been all of them now that I think about it.
I think it was several. It was more than one for sure.
All of the recent Resident Evil Engine games.
Like, it's just like, I get what he's trying to say, but it's the dumbest way to be angry about this.
Right.
For the dumbest reason.
And
Peter
it's not
Moore,
hurt.
Dumbass.
It's not hurt game console sales. The PS5 is doing very well.
Doing great.
Switch is doing very, very well, despite being the most direct competitor to the iPhone.
And the Switch is basically an old piece of shit. I think we can call it that at this point.
Right.
It was already kind of dated when it came out. At this point, it is jank as shit. And it's still crushing it.
Yeah, I think it's 2013 hardware?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Fans have made fixed camera mods for the RE2 remake.
It looks really neat. And you know, when I don't know if you watched the video of this.
No.
It looks pretty spot on to the original PlayStation Resident Evil 2, just in the new graphic engine. But I don't know if like they changed the sound effects or if I just don't notice them when playing the game and over the shoulder.
Yeah.
But it really sounds like they have heavily laid on the zombie moan noise like the whole time, and it sounds ridiculous. It's just like nonstop zombie moan. And though I do think that you can see some of the set pieces a lot better in this third person. Things that you might have missed because you weren't looking at that specific thing can be really focused. However, it does show off how poorly the lighting engine is optimized, that it's clearly illuminating what's in front of you all the time. And so when you can see a broader scope, it kind of looks bad.
Yeah.
Which is a shame.
TMNT Cowabunga Collection will be delisted from Steam in Japan on March 29th with no word regarding other consoles and regions at this time. This is soul-crushing.
Yeah, get it.
This is so not Cowabunga.
There was a physical release from LRG, so it will be preserved out there somewhere, but get it while you can.
How unfortunate. Honestly, it was kind of shocking it came out with all of the companies that had to play ball for all of those games to be in one collection, but still, that's a bummer. And
it is a
on
solid
PC,
collection.
So I don't have an option for physical because fuck me, I guess. I bought it on PC.
How dare you?
Sega Saturn fighting game Rabbit has received a fan translation. Lots of Sega Saturn translations floating around now.
I'm so excited about this move towards Sega Saturn translations.
Good times in these Saturn communities.
Indeed.
Which brings us to our topic at hand, which is Peter Molyneux. I know nobody saw it coming. We did 2 Peter Molyneux games in a row, and now we're just going to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, the co-founder of Bullfrog Studios, who never, ever embellishes or overpromises about anything ever.
Certainly not.
Everything he says is going to be in the game, ends up being in the game, and it's truthful, and it's there.
In a 100% accurate fashion and never half-baked.
Peter Molyneux was born on May 5th, 1959 in Guildford, Surrey, England, which makes him, at time of recording, 64 years old.
Is that...
What?
Is that 64?
That's what his Wikipedia said.
Oh, yeah, I guess it is. I'm
So
trying
I
to math
hope
in my
so.
head, so yeah, that
No,
is.
I would never math on the show. I just read it off of something.
Right.
I found someone else that did the math for me.
I realize, because my dad was born in 1950 and he was 72 last year, so I guess that is right. Yeah.
As far as initial thoughts, Peter Molyneux first entered my life when he began lying about Fable. A friend of mine was very closely following Fable's development, and anytime Molyneux opened his mouth, I would hear about it secondhand from my friend.
Yeah.
So Molyneux would come out in an interview about Fable, which had a pretty lengthy development cycle. And he would say things like, I remember my friend being like, you can get married and buy a house and like you can get your arm cut off in a fight and it like stays off and you just don't have an arm. And he made it set. Now, here's the thing. I'm hearing this secondhand from a kid in middle school
who's already hyped up.
So I don't know how much lying Peter Molyneux actually did about Fable. I do know he did some.
Well, it was the fan sites that were lying, Justin.
Obviously, the fan sites were the liars. But I remember like being so stoked, and he's like, "Yeah, it's this guy Peter Molyneux, and he's gonna make the most realistic fantasy game in the world."
You have to remember, Fable was the second game to ever have fan sites.
And so I was like so pumped, and I bought Fable, and I was like, "This is like a fucking cartoon. This is literally not realistic at all."
It's an okay fantasy game.
I played the shit out of Fable. Loved the game, but the whole time I was like, none of that shit my friend said was true. That Peter Molyneux guy lied.
Fucking Peter Molyneux.
And eventually later, we learned how to pronounce his name correctly and learned that he made other games too. So that was my intro to Peter Molyneux.
Yeah. I probably played Populous first. Rented it on Super NES and was completely overwhelmed because when you rent Populous, you don't get the manual with it. And let me tell you, Populous is the definition of games that need a manual. When you look that up in the dictionary, it's just a picture of Peter Molyneux frowning at a box of Populous.
Yeah, it's a picture of what's that one, like a F1 Falcon and Populous. What was that? Falcon 4.0. That's the fucking game.
Falcon 4, Jane's Advanced Flight Sim, and Populous. But no, I didn't really like pay attention to who he was until Black and White, because that's when like peak Molyneux was hitting the magazines. Like before that, you would occasionally see like developed by Peter Molyneux and Bullfrog for things like Populous or Theme Park or Dungeon Keeper, but then Black and White happened, and that's where you really started to see him selling it, and then of course Fable happened, and that's when people started to realize that maybe he was overselling it. And then everything post Fable has been self-awareness of Peter Molyneux in the world.
Well, it doesn't help that he's working at a company doing like blockchain shit now.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
We'll talk about that later. But tell me about his early history. Where did Peter Molyneux get started in the industry?
Well, Molyneux got his
Peter
start.
Molyneux, the Fable liar.
So he started in his early 20s. He was working at a company that sold floppy disks. And as he put it, he said he got the idea that disks would sell faster if he preloaded them with some games. That's
Peter.
That's how you sell video games, Peter.
When people are buying blank media, please don't put media on their blank media before they... That's called making a different product.
So let me, for people who weren't alive in the 80s when microcomputers and early hobbyist computers were around, a lot of software came in magazine form. And it would just be the entire source code printed in a magazine, and then you would hand type it on your computer and either just compile and run it, or you would save it to a floppy disk so that you could do it later. And so basically he was doing that. He was typing out a program and saving it to these disks and then selling the disks. And he said he realized that people were buying his disks to get the games. So maybe he should sell the games.
This is the weirdest way to back into selling video games I've ever heard. That's like, well, we were selling bags of flour, but realized most people were just making bread. So we thought, what if we turned the bags of flour into bread before they bought it?
Right.
Wouldn't that sell better?
And I forgot to actually put it in the notes, but I think he had said that like his parents were involved in either this floppy disk business or in some sort of computer electronics business, and that's how he got involved in it.
Yeah.
And so he kind of backward his way into selling games.
Weirdest phrasing of all of this.
Right.
All right. Yeah.
And so his first attempt was a business sim that he made called The Entrepreneur, which that is the most Peter Molyneux sounding first game title there possibly could be.
Wikipedia defined this as a text-based business simulation game.
Yeah, and it sold poorly.
Oh, you don't say.
Turns out the market
Even
was
though people still needed the floppy disks and they were just buying the floppy disks to get his game?
Yeah, and so it turns out that the world wasn't yet ready for a text-based business sim. And so...
From a guy that had never run a business at this juncture.
Yeah, that's true. So he and his partner Les Edgar decided that they would form a software business because the games industry clearly was not for them, so they would make software instead. So they make this company called Taurus Impex Limited.
All right.
Which is the most Peter Molyneux sounding name for a software business.
British game companies always have the best names anyway. Right? They just have they win that across the board.
Yes, absolutely.
What's your company called? Epic Mega Games.
Wasn't Epic Mega Games American? Because that was Cliffy B's company.
I guess they were.
But
yeah.
Elite
what was I thinking of? I was thinking of Rare. What was Rare called?
Oh yeah, Ultimate Play the Game.
Ultimate Play the Game. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Not Epic. Ultimate Play the Game.
Yes, that was definitely and Elite as well was a good one. Elite Games.
Yes.
Anyway, so they start their software company, Taurus Software, and shortly before the release of the Amiga, Molyneux had gotten an unexpected phone call from Commodore at their business asking if Taurus was interested in supporting the Amiga when it came out. And then he goes to an in-person meeting with them, and Commodore offered to ship them 10 units to begin development. And as the meeting was ending, he realized they were not trying to reach them. They were trying to reach a different company called Taurus that was spelled differently that made network equipment. But he didn't want to, ruin this possible arrangement.
He's like, just sign the fucking contract.
So he just signs the contract and gets the free Amiga units, and then he calls Commodore. And it's like, oh, you didn't mean to get with us. You meant this other company called Taurus, the network company. No, we make software.
It's okay. How do you back into selling games and then back into having a software company in a deal? Like, how does this happen?
So he has all these Amigas, and he sorted it out with Commodore, and I'm sure there was some sort of payment involved.
Right.
But he has these Amigas before the release of the Commodore, so he immediately starts making business software for the Amiga.
Sure.
And because he was the earliest company with business software on the Amiga, he was able to sell some units. And so that's how he became an Amiga programmer. And because he had that early experience with the Amiga, Molyneux was asked by a friend of his to help him port a Commodore 64 game to the Amiga, and that was what gave them the decision to form Bullfrog to make games for specifically the Amiga, but also for other things. Though, however, I did find in another interview, Molyneux said he wasn't approached by that person, but rather that he reached out to that publisher and offered to port the game completely unprompted.
I'm starting to feel like he might be lying about a lot of this.
So I'd like to say that the more I researched Molyneux, especially his early career, the more inconsistencies I found in his interviews.
Just the notion of like, well, I was selling blank floppies, but I thought, what if they weren't blank? Just what? Just all of it. It's all so weird.
There's a lot of weirdness, and I feel like some of it may have been embellished over the years.
Sure. I mean, he's not known to do that, but I suppose.
But also some of it is a little contradictory.
Yeah.
So take everything with a grain of salt when it comes to Molyneux's career.
For sure.
So this is when they found Bullfrog. So this was in 1987. It was Molyneux and his partner Les Edgar formed Bullfrog. And their first original game with Bullfrog was Populous, which was an early God game. And it feels like he was setting himself up for the same failure as before, because this is a very overly complicated game in a market that wasn't super sold on overly complicated games yet.
Yeah. Also a very stylized game. Like even the UI is like built into like the visual style of Populous.
Oh yeah. And graphically it was very impressive for its time too.
And as was the law in the UK at the time, it was isometric.
That is true. It was required.
It was illegal to make non-isometric games in the UK until the mid-90s.
Yeah. Well, until at least like 90-91. we had to save room for James Pond.
Right, obviously.
So Molyneux was certain that this game was going to be an instant success.
Yeah.
He thought that he was going to make his God game. Everybody would want his God game. He would be top selling publisher. But despite that, Bullfrog was having a hard time finding a publisher that would take a chance on this weird isometric God game. But they did eventually sign a deal with EA and got the game to release in 1989. However, I did also find other interviews where Molyneux insisted he never thought the game would sell at all until it broke the 1 million sales mark, and he was suddenly surprised that the game sold to anyone.
And of course, this is back when EA was all about art and artists and putting design and art first. And this is original EA.
Yeah,
before they became Darth Vader later on, I guess.
And it's funny when you look at old EA packaging, because it always says who the designer was front and center on the box. It'll say like Bill Budge's pinball construction kit or whatever.
Yeah.
But on Populous, it says Bullfrog Productions Populous.
Yeah.
It didn't have Molyneux's name. It just said Bullfrog.
Someone say by Bullfrog.
Right. Yeah. Something like that.
Bullfrog.
Yeah. So instead of Molyneux's name, it did have Bullfrog's name, which felt kind of contradictory for EA at the time, but doesn't really stand out at all now.
Yeah.
So Populous was a success. It went on to sell 4 million units. It was a huge hit for EA.
Reviewed super well.
Oh yeah. Bullfrog and EA went on to license out the game for home consoles, and it continued to sell on those other consoles as Molyneux and his team started working on their next title. And then they kept bringing on more people. They initially were making games that were similar to Populous, like Powermonger and Populous 2. And Molyneux has said in some interviews this was due to pressure from EA, which could have been. I can see that. And following these successful collaborations, EA acquired a significant share in Bullfrog. And then they continued to make slightly more varied games. You saw Theme Park and Magic Carpet come out during this era. Molyneux was given a role within EA as vice president and consultant.
A very Miyamoto-esque role.
Right. And this was while he was still working at Bullfrog, a separate company that EA owned a bunch of, but then EA just bought Bullfrog outright anyway. And then the first major game that they made as a part of EA was Dungeon Keeper, which we've discussed recently, and it had a bit of a development process. But Molyneux was unhappy with the direction that EA was taking Bullfrog. But he wasn't saying it out loud because, he had that nice title at EA.
Right. Money. Lots of money.
And according to Molyneux, his friend Tim Rance, who would go on to help co-found Lionhead, convinced him to type up a letter of resignation as an exercise to let out his frustration with EA. But he had no intentions of ever sending it off. But then Rance sent it to EA's CEO before Molyneux could stop him.
So here's the thing.
I
don't know if I believe that, because if true, that's the biggest making someone quit their job is like a potentially life-ruining thing.
Yeah, that's not a thing that you just immediately forgive the person and go co-found a company with them.
And also, couldn't you easily just go to them and say, oh my God, I was just venting. I never meant to send that.
That's what he did. He convinced EA that it was not meant to be sent, and it was a mistake, and it was a prank and a joke, and that
Tim Rance sounds like a piece of shit.
Right. And so he stayed on with EA for a couple of months after this point, but it led to major tensions between EA and Molyneux because he resigned.
Yeah.
So eventually he did leave EA after Dungeon Keeper released.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So at this point, this is right at the end of Bullfrog. This is right before Lionhead. So this is kind of the pocket of his designs we've been talking about between Dungeon Keeper and Black and White in our Molyneux March extravaganza that we're doing.
Unintentionally, it just kind of happened.
Accidentally, yeah. We just it happened to be there. This is kind of the era where he's getting a lot of acclaim in the industry.
Right. Yeah. Many of his games have been incredibly successful, and a lot of publications, especially British computer gaming publications, were treating him as like the superstar of computer games development.
And you used a phrase last episode, and you said that he was kind of treated as sort of the Miyamoto of the UK.
Right.
And my first inclination is to laugh at that because he seems like a ridiculous man. Very smart, inventive man that's made some really great games.
Yeah.
But I wonder how we would feel about Miyamoto in comparison if he wasn't made to be so secretive.
Right, yeah. If Nintendo hadn't kept everything under wraps.
Like, Nintendo, it's part of his contracts that he can't talk about personal interests he has.
Yeah, except for banjo and measuring things.
And chain smoking cigarettes. And so I wonder if we knew about every crackpot pitch he had for everything, would we not be like, oh, Miyamoto, that guy that fucking lies about video games for years and years, and then they come out and they don't have half the features he wanted.
Right.
Like, how many designers would we feel the exact same way about? Not like, I mean, Molyneux has told some outright fibs about his video games before. It is well documented.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that, you know, compared to other idea guys in the industry, other designers of this clout, you know, how many of them would we feel the same about if they just happened to be in a market situation, an industry situation, like in the UK at this time working for EA, where they were encouraged to be as open and transparent as possible with the media as much as they felt like.
And also, it didn't help how much Microsoft hyped up Fable.
For sure.
On top of Molyneux himself hyping up Fable, which led to this hype cycle that was building on itself. And that brought a ton of attention to all of Molyneux's exaggerations, we can say.
I can go back now and watch videos of Molyneux talking about games that haven't come out yet, saying things about them I know are not true.
Right, yeah.
But like you touched on last episode, in our Black and White episode, he is so passionate and excited and has this very like whimsical nature about his excitement that you're kind of like, all right. Up. Yeah, man. Like you see, even knowing now, after post the game that like it didn't happen, I'm still like, okay, fuck yeah, dude.
And it's clear that in a lot of these examples, he wants these things to happen.
Totally.
He just hasn't stopped to think about if they are plausible.
If Miyamoto was announcing all of the things in all of our favorite Nintendo games that had gotten cut before the game came out and saying it would be there, people would be fucking livid.
Oh, yeah.
Because I can't even imagine the amount of... Now, granted, Miyamoto has a much bigger catalog, much more respectable catalog.
Yeah.
Because he's... I mean, it's you know, he's Miyamoto. Like, he's the designer, right?
Yeah.
Like, in the video... I don't know of anyone as famous or prolific as him in the industry. But it was just interesting because I was thinking about that. I was like, he has that same kind of vibe, but he also gets this rap as being like, oh, Peter Molyneux, the fucking liar. And it's like, no, I think he just maybe needs a better handler.
And I do think that a lot of it has been exaggerated by the community over the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Because he got caught in some of these gross exaggerations over and over, it became his... like how people know him. It's his reputation now as he is the guy who exaggerates, and that has been exaggerated on over the years. So one of the YouTube channels that I watch pretty often, anytime they have to mention Molyneux, will always show the same short clip of him during an interview where he's like looking contemplative, but they keep like enlarging his forehead every time they show this clip. And that's my mental image of him is still like that version of Molyneux, despite the fact that I know what he actually looks like.
Yeah, like, because here's the thing, because I've seen a lot of talks with him, and obviously this is all leading into Lionhead, because I feel like him hitting Lionhead is kind of the rise and fall of this persona of Molyneux, the famous designer, right? Is that I forgot entirely what I was, going to say. What was I going to say? No, hold on, I got it. I'm grasping. It's gone. I've lost it. I'll remember it in a minute, and I'll bring it up. But it's.
This is kind of.
No, hold on. I got it. Okay, here's the thing. So, when we talk about like the guy that was when No Man's Sky was being announced, and that liar told lies about his game, he stood on stage at a Sony event and said, "Our game will have X, Y, and Z,
right?
Major features." And then those things never happened.
Or if they did, it was years after the game released.
This is in a publicly released media event advertising this product. A lot of Molyneux's videos are just him hanging out, smoking a cigarette, talking about what cool things could be in black and white.
Yeah, or it's like an interview with some fly-by-night publication that happened because it looks like he is willing to do any interview at any time.
He just seems excited to talk about games.
Some YouTube channel I looked at that had relatively small number of subscribers. They wanted to do an episode on Molyneux, and they reached out to him, and he just like did an interview with them. He just got on his webcam and was like, let's talk about what Populous was like.
And I think sometimes the gaming zeitgeist doesn't differentiate between someone standing on a stage listing bullet points that their game is going to feature for $59.99 plus tax, and a guy talking generally about a game he is working on making.
Yeah, that he is planning on producing at some point.
And so I think context is important here. Molyneux sitting by a computer chatting about the game he's working on.
Yeah.
That's not a bullet point list. That's not a marketing flyer.
I did see one interview with him while I was doing this where he's talking about, I don't even remember which, he was talking about Syndicate. And he's mentioning some things that are in it. And the interviewer says, "I don't think that was in Syndicate. I recently replayed Syndicate, and I don't remember that." And Molyneux goes, "Oh, did we cut that? I don't remember." And then he just keeps going. So
it's like it never feels. I'll say this: I've never felt like his lies felt sinister or intentionally deceitful. I feel like sometimes he gets caught up in his own, je ne sais quoi, and he's kind of, high on his own supply, as it were.
Yes. Yeah.
But I don't ever feel like he's like, yes, my game will have X, Y, and Z. It will be $59.99. It comes out this November. Thank you. Have a good day. It's never like that.
Yeah, it never feels like he's trying to sell it. It more feels like he's just so excited about all the ideas he has that he never stops to think about which ones he can actually get into a game.
Now, granted,
that's
other side of the coin, devil's advocate, he could be aware of what he's saying about a product people are about to pay $59.99. I'm just throwing it out there. Right. You could just be more aware of what you're saying about the thing you're going to sell me.
That's true. Yeah.
Let's talk Lionhead.
Yes. So this is when we get to Lionhead. This is he's left EA. So he's teaming up with some Bullfrog alums, Tim Rance and Mark Webley, as well as who we mentioned in the last episode, Games Workshop co-founder Steve Jackson, and the four of them found Lionhead Studios. The goal of the studio initially was to develop high-quality games without growing too large.
Okay.
And also that they would only develop a single game at a time. That was their intention from the get-go.
These are noble goals.
Yes.
Even more noble in today's gaming market.
Right. And he said that when they announced their formation, the studio was noteworthy enough that representatives from, quote, Nintendo, Sega, IDOS, GT Interactive, and Lego had approached him about collaborations. One of those things is not like the others, by the way.
Now, to be fair, there was the famous Populous story about how they prototyped Populous with a Lego board game that they had made.
Right.
So maybe, I don't know.
Who knows?
Just trying to figure something out.
This was before Lego video games were good.
Yeah.
Or notable. Yeah. So it is a little weird that is in that list for 1997.
For sure.
And then ultimately, despite having just left EA on questionable terms, their first contract is with EA within a month of operation, and that led to Black and White. And during the development of Black and White, the studio grew beyond their initial intentions. And they said that they were trying to keep the small head count, but they also kept opening up satellite companies in order to have additional talent. By 2002, shortly after Black and White's release, between Lionhead and its various satellite companies they had created, they had 107 employees making 6 games.
Okay.
And some interviews I read said that Molyneux himself had come up with the idea to make the satellite companies. Other interviews said that it was other people within Lionhead. Molyneux also blames bad advice that he had received, bad financial advice, which led to them having a stock IPO. And he said that stock IPO was what accelerated development of all these different games because they had to keep the shareholders happy. Right. Specifically, he said that that pushed the development on the movies further up than it should have been because he hadn't really fully fleshed out the idea of what that was going to be yet before they started working on it. And he says all of that was a mistake.
I forgot about the movies.
Yeah.
That was I didn't ever play the movies, but people I know that were into that were super into it. Andrew was really into the movies.
Andrew was big into it. Yeah.
I believe it was like one of his favorites.
Yeah. And it was one of those things that, again, on paper was a really ambitious idea. And then it released. So the games that were in development at these studios, you had Fable, you had the movies, and as well as Black and White 2. And they were struggling to find publishers for many of these. Eventually, Microsoft jumped in to publish Fable as an Xbox exclusive. Prior to the release of the game, Lionhead went ahead and purchased all of its satellite studios just to make them all the Lionhead brand, because they all had different names. And so when you looked at the development credits, you were seeing like all these different companies, but it's all really Lionhead.
Yeah.
And so after they acquired everybody, they were up to 220 employees making multiple projects, really the exact opposite of what their stated goals were.
Yeah.
And then the movies and Black and White 2 both released in 2005, and they failed to meet sales expectations, and the studio was really suffering financially. And so in order to bail them out, they agreed to sell to Microsoft. And Molyneux stayed with the studio for a while, mostly to focus on the Fable series, though they did also announce Project Milo.
Oh boy, Kinect games.
Yeah. Molyneux later said that Microsoft basically told them you have to make Kinect games and everything has to have Kinect featurality, and that was really what drove him away from Microsoft.
Doesn't shock me that Microsoft would say that.
Yeah. But man, Project Milo, do you remember that one?
I feel like I remember it only in reference to it was used for the Fable Kinect game.
Right. But it was announced as a separate standalone project. That was supposed to be the killer Kinect app.
Yeah.
Which is a little boy that you could talk to.
Excuse me?
It was a little boy named Milo.
Oh, that's weird.
And he lived in your Xbox.
Nope.
And you would talk to him.
Well, I'm not going to make any jokes.
Yeah.
Just
the whole thing.
You're just going to let it all go. Go
back and look at some videos of Project Milo at some point, because it's the most bizarre, batshit crazy thing. And it's another one of those things that people, attribute to Molyneux's bad rap, because it was also overpromised from what the 360 could have even theoretically been able to do.
There's so many fucking jokes I want to make, Saturn. There's so many.
It was supposed to be like the world's most lifelike AI.
I want to make so many jokes.
It was bizarre.
I'll do them after the show.
Yeah.
I'll do them after.
So in 2012, Molyneux left Microsoft to form another studio as an independent developer, and Microsoft would, of course, shut down Lionhead completely in 2016, which Phil Spencer has later said was one of the biggest mistakes that Microsoft's Xbox brand ever made.
Oh, yeah. I think I would agree with that. I mean, one of the complaints that people have with Microsoft is that their first-party stuff feels not diverse enough, samey. You know, I mean, granted, you know, their major franchises are pretty different from one another, but they're just, at least until, you know, picking up Bethesda or ZeniMax, there just wasn't a ton of diversity. And Lionhead, say what you will, made some pretty diverse stuff. I mean, between, you know, Black and White and Fable and the movies and the various sequels and expansions to those, like it added a lot of diversity.
Microsoft really pushed them into Kinect and then drove them into the ground.
Yeah,
and
totally.
It was just an unfortunate end to what could have been a really interesting studio.
So this is kind of the dark time for Peter Molyneux, I feel. This is when we get into 22 cans.
Yeah, this is the weird era.
The era he's still in.
This is old man yelling at cloud era of Peter Molyneux's career, unfortunately.
So tell us about 22 cans before we quickly stop talking about 22 cans because gross.
So he formed his third development studio. It was 22 Cans, which is a stupid name. It's the numbers 22.
I think that's how many beers they drank before they came up with the name.
So it's the numbers 22 followed by the lowercase word cans, and it's supposed to be pronounced as 22 cans, like the bird.
But you would, if that's the case, you would pronounce it as two cans.
No, that would be two toucans. This is 22 cans.
Oh my God.
There's 20 of them, and they are toucans.
But if the 2 is part of cans, then it's not part of the 20. I can't handle this.
It's a dumb name.
Which backstabbing bastard did he form this company with? Was it Tim Rance?
So it was Tim Rance and Peter Murphy, both of whom had come from Lionhead. And their first title was a mobile game called, quote, Curiosity, what's inside the cube?
I fell for this one. I was like, because here's
originally,
the thing, again, it sounds interesting.
Yes. So originally it was supposed to just be called Curiosity, but they found there were already many other software and game titles called Curiosity.
You don't say.
So they instead called it What's Inside the Cube, and Molyneux claimed What's Inside the Cube is life-changingly amazing by any definition. And so it was kind of a contesty thing. You'd have to open up the cube. And in May of 2013, Molyneux announced on Twitter the last layer of the cube had been opened. The winning player who opened the cube was given the option to either share the contents of the cube or keep it for himself. It was a guy named Brian Henderson of Edinburgh.
So hold on. Before you say what the contents were, the game was you log into what's in the cube, and you basically have little mining picks, and you're picking away at this cube made of millions and millions of tiny, smaller cubes, and eventually someone's going to get to the center of this cube.
Yeah. And
that's the whole
Tootsie
thing.
Roll center of the cube.
Yeah, and you could get awarded coins, and you could use coins to upgrade the picks that you have to mine away more cubes. And it was like a race to see who could get to the center of the cube. And everyone was mining the same cube.
I wasn't. I didn't even try this.
I tried it.
I saw Peter Molyneux's name, and I was like, no, I'm done.
I was like, oh, the Fable guy? And he was like, it's the most life-changing game you will ever play.
Yeah.
And then I was like, is it a game? Because I think I'm just clicking stuff. So tell us what was in the cube.
So
what Brian found. Was it Brian?
Brian Henderson of Edinburgh decided he would share the contents of the cube with everyone, and it was a YouTube video, which told him that he was going to be the all-powerful digital god in 22 Can's upcoming game, Godus, and he would also receive a portion of the game's revenue.
The game which has a complete and utter commercial failure?
So, in late 2012, 22 Cans started their Kickstarter campaign to help fund Godus, which they claimed was going to be a spiritual successor to Populous, because apparently Black and White never happened.
No, forget that.
And the campaign wasn't funded until 2 days before the campaign ended, which...
That's bad.
This is the same platform that funded Ouya in a day.
Oh, God. I forgot about Ouya.
And
the
one
weird
of the
collective. You know, sometimes we look back on things and we're like, how the fuck did, like, the FMV video game revolution happen? What was everyone smoking? I'll tell you, it was the same thing they were smoking when we all funded the Ouya, and we were all collectively excited about it, and then we were like, oh, it sucks.
Yeah, and so among the stretch goals that never got hit for Godus were ports to Linux and Ouya. So Anyway, Godus released on Steam Early Access in September 2013, followed by a full release on mobile platforms the next year, though the PC release never left Early Access and it was delisted in 2023. In February of 2015, Brian Henderson, who had won the contest, told publications he had not heard from 22 Cans since the game's release. And in fact, he hadn't heard from them since he won the contest.
Oh, boy.
2 years after that, Molyneux said that the employee at 22 Cans who was in charge of keeping in touch with Brian had left the company and no one else knew to pick up the task. And he also claimed that the game itself was never profitable, so there were no profits to share with him. So, in fact, his prize for winning contest was nothing. However, Devolver Digital later got in touch with him to offer him something else in exchange, just because they felt bad for how badly he was screwed over.
Yeah.
And then there was also a spinoff of Godus called Godus Wars, which was released in 2016, and nothing at all has come from 22 Cans since then, though Molyneux does still claim that Godus and other Godus-related projects are in development, and they have since most recently announced Project Moat, which he claims will take place in the Fable universe.
How sad.
That was a couple years ago, I think that one was announced, and nothing has happened since then.
I still can't get over the name of this company. 22 Can. Is it all right? Is it like 22 cans like there are 22 cans like the birds?
Yeah, so it's supposed to be a pun that it's both 20 of the bird toucan and also 22 cans.
But why?
I don't know.
But why?
I don't know. Why do you have to slap the shit out of your creature in black and white to teach it a lesson?
No, it's almost like Peter Molyneux wanted to become the liar that everyone said he was. I think it's all like a meta narrative where he's like, the game of Peter Molyneux is coming to a conclusion as I've descended into the depths of being the liar that the black and white fan sites claimed I was. Like it's all some Kaufman-esque performance art.
It's been such a weird career trajectory because he really, throughout the 90s, he really was pumping out hit after hit after hit. He was
one of the top, most notable Western developers in the world. I mean,
and then
he was up there
with Black and White, and arguably with Fable as well, which was a really well-received game, even if it didn't hit all of the goals it had.
It was well-received enough that they made like 5 Fable games. Fables 1 through 3, Lost Chapters. They made the Connect game. I think there's some other one, like the Anniversary Edition. Like, they're milking that cow.
And then he just kind of like fell off the cliff. Almost instantly was just a nosedive into weird.
And I wonder how much of it is... Like, I know he got a lot of creative control when he was working with EA. And I know that was kind of part of his contract. But I wonder how much of this is, something that I think we've seen hints of in his early career of, like, untethered idea guy was kind of tethered by EA, a corporation wanting to make money. Even artsy-fartsy era EA was still like, we publish games and we make money. Like, that was what they were doing.
And even when he went to Lionhead, he had like Steve Jackson and others there to be like, okay, we need to rein it in every now and then. We need to actually make a product.
I think he got disillusioned and he was like, I'm just going to go be pure ideas and I'll give it to the people and they can do what they will with it. Because like all this shit with the contest and it tying into Godus, then Godus being crowdfunded, like I can see him writing this all down on paper.
Yeah.
Or thinking about it in traffic like he did Dungeon Keeper or making Lego out of it or whatever his fucking process is. I can see him coming up with these ideas and I can see like if I knew him being like, this is an awesome idea, like a cool social experiment video game to reveal like a person that's going to be featured in your next game and then they get to share the profits and it's all crowdfunded. Like this is cool. And then it's like basically like a populist reboot, like going back to your roots. This is all on paper, awesome ideas.
Yeah.
But apparently at no point did they contact any business person to help them do it.
You know, and when you think about the weird, like, top level ideas of all this, it feels like you can draw a straight line arrow from the ins and gotus and the weird what's inside the cube game, and starts with, well, let's sell a floppy disk that happens to have a game on it.
Yeah. You can absolutely see that lineage.
Yeah.
And
it's just such a weird path that it took to get there.
It's been such a nosedive that it makes you wonder, was he ever good? How much of it was people honing his creativity? Because I've known people like this in my life that are just raw creative energy. And if you can laser focus that, if they have someone in their life that can help them focus that, you get amazing stuff. You know, like, Miyamoto's over there, like, measuring your wife and chain smoking cigarettes and playing banjo. But if you can get someone to laser focus him for a few minutes, you get Pikmin. You know what I mean? If you can squeeze just enough ideas out of him while he's laser focused and then hand it to people that make products, you can get something really amazing.
If you can get a manager in there to get them to work, they make amazing things.
Yeah.
But the moment you take your eyes off of them, they're roaming the streets in their pajamas, flinging a cat around.
Like someone at Nintendo, their whole job was to make Miyamoto stop chain smoking and climbing trees in Breath of the Wild and actually fucking design something.
Yeah.
So he has a handler there. It's some dude who hates his fucking life because Miyamoto's over there just like hula hooping in the corner and like taking bong hits. And he's like, hey man, we got to make a new Mario game, you know?
And what we've learned is Tim Rance was not the right handler for Peter Molyneux.
No. And so, you know, Peter Molyneux has some really awesome ideas, really cool, engaging, innovative, interesting ideas. And when he's in an environment, and it seems that environment is a bunch of his friends at his house making games, they seem to crank out some really cool shit.
Yeah.
And it seems that everything that has removed him from that, you know, like it seems that he was at his best when his studio was his home. Everyone worked out of his house, and they had some oversight from EA putting some bumpers on things here and there. And with that all removed, he seems a little directionless,
a little free form.
It's sad, and I hope he can find where he wants to be.
And even if he doesn't, even if Project Moat doesn't end up being some grand success, I think he still has many years and many projects to be incredibly proud of.
Totally. I mean, if he was like, I quit the industry tomorrow, he's got Populous, Dungeon Keeper, Black and White, Theme Park, the movies, Fable. Like, he has an absolutely legendary resume.
Absolutely.
You know?
And so many of his, especially his earliest games, are just it's hard to measure their influence on the industry.
Totally.
The influence that he and his games have had on especially the PC gaming industry, especially the European game development industry, were massive.
Yeah,
and even Black and White, which we talked about in the last episode, you know, it's a little clunky and wonky today, but it is massively influential on game design of that era.
Yeah.
And I don't know that games would be in the same place today without Peter Molyneux's contribution.
Totally.
But his current contribution is really fucking weird.
His current contribution seems to be grifting.
Yeah, I feel like he has been like flirting with retirement for so long, and he's just kind of like playing around with, oh, maybe I want to do this, or maybe I want to do that, but not actually doing anything anymore.
This is absolute pure speculation, just based on the way he seems, the person he seems like he is. I feel like he's one of those guys that's like, I can't leave this industry until I make my magnum opus.
Yeah.
And he wants one final grand idea to see through, because he seems like he's never quite been fully happy with anything else that has come to fruition.
Yeah.
And I think that it may just
hopefully
be
his magnum opus doesn't end up being Project Milo. I hope he doesn't go back to that.
It may just be in his nature that he just isn't happy, because you know, every project has limitations, and he seems to be a person that operates in a fantasy world of no limitations. And that's how we get such
his best
great
projects.
ideas.
I feel like his best projects were all the ones that were hampered by limitations, either by hardware or technical limitations or business limitations,
or deadlines, or
all seem to produce some of his best work.
Yeah, so it's he is I guess we're getting into final thoughts. He is a fascinating man who has made some absolutely stellar games.
Right.
I think I think he got a bad rap for a little while in an era of his career where maybe he didn't deserve it.
Right.
But I think now maybe he does deserve some of it for some of the later stuff.
Yeah.
Where you're like, hey, dude, what happened?
His last 10 years have been questionable at best.
Not fantastic for him. But
you know what is fantastic?
You know what is fantastic is our Patreon at patreon.com/Retro Warriors, where you can get all sorts of things that I'm not going to tell you about. I'm just a secret. You got to fucking go there and look at the website.
How about that?
Good. So aggressive. How about that? Huh? We want to thank the following Patreons for their money that they give us, starting with Chris Forbes
and Gold Leader,
Elemento Geek, Jorge Valdez,
and Michael Medina,
Ian Hindi,
Casey McCoy,
yes, Charles G,
Sean S,
Matt Stone,
and Asher Abramowitz
are all the patrons we want to thank for their kind contributions. Presumably they're kind. Maybe you press the button angrily and you're like, fuck you guys, and then you give us the money.
Donations.
Just however you want to do it. You can feel however you want.
We appreciate it either way.
But Patreon does have a special piece of API on their website that they try to see how aggressively you click the mouse, so they tell us if you're angry.
Unless you're using a phone, then they have no way to know how aggressive you are.
Right, obviously, because you can't gauge taps. That's
right.
What a ridiculous. Anyway, thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week, and as always, let us cling together.